let's get started. I see we've got a handful of people here today joining us. I would imagine anybody that's here is probably interested in resumes, right? We've got the resume expert here, and Claire is going to share kind of her experience in the industry, some resume tips and tricks. This is what she does. She's a former sales rep, recruiter, and podcast host, and now founder of Traction Resume, and really helping candidates with their resumes, career coaching, personal branding, and kind of building that story. So we're so grateful to have her as part of the lobby and really being our kind of lead in this area and expert on all things resume. Because as we know, if you're applying, this is where everything starts, right? The first thing that someone's going to look at is your resume. So it's kind of your first impression. So anybody that's on today, if you do have questions specifically about your situation or about a resume or something, please feel free to put that in the chat. We'll certainly address those questions and also we'll do some Q&A at the end. But Claire, I want to let you start with just kind of, giving us some of your experience in the industry, right? Your
Yeah,
experience in the medical sales space and kind of walking us to what you do today.
yeah, for sure. In fact, I just got off the phone with a recruiter shortly before this, Nick Poloni, who I think is going to be your next person in the lobby network. I'm so excited. I'm sending him right over to you, Kendi. He's awesome.
Awesome.
And what we connected on was we have a very similar story about how we got started in this industry. And so for those of you who you haven't met yet, I'm Claire Davis, and I'm the CEO of Traction Resume. But before we opened this beautiful business to help people land those roles that they love and interviews with these awesome resumes, I was a recruiter, and I was specifically a pharmaceutical sales headhunter. And the story goes, my mother actually opened a business, and it was called McVicker and Associates. So if anybody remembers that group, we did a lot of really wonderful work for the pharma industry, and we built a lot of sales teams before their product launches. And as a young professional in my high school years and college years, I was the cook, cleaner, and candle maker. Like truly, I was janitor. I was filing a million resumes by hand because this was all before the digital age had really descended on recruiting. And I had also spent many evenings sleeping under the desk as we worked late into the night trying to find candidates and fill that roster before the interview process. So, what was neat about it, other than a deep, profound respect for what recruiters do and how hard they work and the hours that they work and the phone that's just truly physically attached to them, was it really gave me a foundation in what it takes to be competitive in your career and what it really takes to land the jobs that you're interested in and what that looks like. And so why I bring that up is that there are so many things that have changed. And every day we're seeing lots and lots of um, frustration from job seekers and more layoffs coming from all kinds of medical sales companies. Certainly not just pharma, certainly not just device. And what I want to remind you guys is that though there are a lot of things that are different today, many things have remained the same. Because after working for that recruiting group, I ended up going into the field myself, which was an absolute joy. I loved it. And I got to work in diagnostics and oncology and women's health and genetics. And through all that, I went through 5 big, beautiful layoffs. Okay. And so, but if somebody's going to be laid off, let it be somebody who's been in the recruiting seat too. So it was kind of like this, new mission of, okay, Claire, you know how to get other people jobs. Now you got to put your money where your mouth is, and now you have to use what you know to do it too. And so that's really where I found there are some things that have changed. The market has progressed. There are modern methods for networking, interviewing, resumes, all those things. But what's remained the same is great storytelling and working through people. So that's really what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, because stories are one of the main components of what we do at Traction Resume every day. And when I got better at telling my story to the people I wanted to hire me, um, I got hired faster and I got hired for more money and I got hired without having to take a step back in my title or in my progression of my career because I learned how to tell my value more clearly. And so, we've had a couple of resume sessions, Kendi, which has been amazing. And I just thought today, with so much turmoil in the market, I think that it's always a great reminder to hold fast to what has always worked. And certainly be on the cutting edge with your materials. There are a lot of resources out there. There are groups like ours. There's many, many resources. But if you can stick to great storytelling and value-based messaging and working through people first, that's really where the major momentum will happen. So that's kind of what I'm hoping we could talk about today.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so important that your resume does tell that story, right? Of who you are, where you've been, what you've accomplished, and really where you want to go in your career.
Yeah.
What are some of the when you think about storytelling, when you think about building that story out with someone that comes to you and says, "Hey, I need help with my resume. I need help putting that together." What are some of the first things you kind of start to work on or massage on the resume or questions you start to ask those candidates?
Yeah, great question. So typically what I see come across my desk before we've helped those with their story. And if you are here and you're thinking, okay, well, I thought I was storytelling, but no one's getting it, or I thought that I was telling my story, but I'm not really getting the traction that I want to when I'm trying to grab these interviews. People are just passing me over. Or if you have had ChatGPT tell your story and for some reason it's just not sounding like you, then you're in the right spot. Um, I find that stories, great stories that really sell us, typically have two parts. So one is a part that we hear about ad nauseum on LinkedIn and everywhere that is a career site. There's a ton of advice out there on social media that happens to be somewhere in the line of, your UVP. What's your unique value proposition, right? And the truth is that's a really wonderful way to start. And it takes a little bit of introspection. So if today you're listening and you're like, well, I don't even know what my value is, other than the quota I've received quarter over quarter, then you might want to take a step back and do a personality test or do a strengths finder. Or, and if anybody was following me last week, I think I posted this in the lobby, but I'll make sure it's there. You can even reach out to trusted colleagues and friends and family and ask them, hey, what do you find is something that, some way that I bring value? What are ways that you see me impact others that you find are uniquely the way that I do things? What do you think I'm kind of good at? And you'll be surprised at how many people actually will answer that email and make you feel really great about yourself, but give you information that a lot of times we have blinders on too, and we don't see about ourselves. So if you're just starting, I would say start there. Look at your strengths. Look at the intrinsic value that you bring to a team. And also look at the results that you have generated for other companies. So that's a true indicator. That's where the numbers are on how you have leveraged that for a company, which is very important. But we don't want to stop at our historical greatness, right? I feel like a lot of people talk about the UVP and then they're like, that's it, launch that UVP and everybody is going to get it. But what happens is that we are actually asking people to do a little bit too much. And it's kind of like if you ever tell someone a joke at a barbecue and you're standing around, there's like five people, and you kind of launch this joke and you lead up to the joke and you tell them the joke, and then you don't give them the punchline. And we're wondering why nobody's laughing. It's because we need to really take it that next step. And the next step that I'm talking about is relevance. Because where we can fall flat, even if we've spent a lot of time crafting a beautiful story about ourselves and a wonderful value proposition, is now how does that matter to your target? So, Kendi, I'm sure you've got some baseball analogies rolling around in your mind right now because it's
Yeah.
really all about what are you looking to do next and for whom? So if you need to
Right.
increase your, batting average, what are you going to tell people, Kendi, to work on?
Um, Getting in the cage, taking some practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, finding their
Yeah,
weaknesses and working on those weaknesses to improve.
totally. And so
Yeah,
then the Diamondbacks can win more games, right?
yeah,
Or win.
exactly.
So that's really the next step that I encourage people to take today, because what I see, and this isn't just people who are new to writing their resume or who are within first 5 years of their career in medical sales. It's everybody. I'm seeing this at the rep level, the first line level, the VP level, and even the C-suite level, because often you haven't had to do this kind of an exercise with yourself for a long time.
Yeah,
So ask yourself, who do you help? And what do you help them achieve or unlock for their business? So it can take you from something that sounds like, I'm a multi-talented leader in the AI and health space who's driven 5 million, upwards of $5 million for companies in short order with new product launch. Or you can take it that one next step and say, in the rare disease space, in companies who are looking to expand nationally, right? So think about where your target is, and that hiring manager and that company, that team, that executive board who's thinking, all right, we've got to bring some people on here because we need to make some inroads in business. What do they need to accomplish? And then ask yourself, how does your UVP, well, how does your value really relate to what they're looking to achieve? I've even had people take it from a completely different standpoint where they've done a little bit of research online and they've found that a company is just known for a terrible culture. And you guys, if you're here and you're in the medical sales space, there are companies who struggle with culture. There are wonderful, renowned cultures, and there are some companies that tend to be places that chew you up and spit you out, right? Or
yeah.
maybe they have lost many people on their team, and through networking that they just can't seem to hang on to great talent. And so maybe your UVP is talking about how you uniquely build teams that thrive together in the women's health market, right? So then we're talking about why you are valuable and why you are relevant. And to me, that tells a really great story. So that's really where we come with more of the value forward in the message than just talking about our historical wins alone. Yeah.
Love it. And I see a lot of resumes and have looked at many over the last couple of years, and there's so many different formats, there's so many different ways people structure it. Um, when you think about building this out, if someone's listening and trying to restructure the resume, maybe they're going through a layoff, or trying to get in an industry, or just looking for that next job and looking to sharpen their resume. What when you think about the structure, the layout of the resume, and incorporating your UVP, incorporating relevance, how do you actually include those items in the resume as far as structure and where to put it, how to put it, those types of things? Like, what guidance would you give someone?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question. This week, I'll say three of the resumes that I looked at they had all the same structure, and so we all started from the same point, and it was, you don't need an objective statement at the top of your resume anymore. The truth is that with the culture of immediacy, and we're such an immediate gratification culture, people really do give you only a fraction of a minute when they're looking at your resume. They're looking for a couple of three key things, by the way, on your resume. They're typically looking at for logos, they're looking for timelines, and they're looking for gaps. So if you're wondering where you're going to, like, what are the hot ticket items that people are going to be looking at first, typically those are the three. And so When you are structuring this resume, we want to get right to the point of what we would bring to an organization and who we are and why that matters. So, in terms of structure, I always recommend that the biggest, brightest thing on the resume is your name, and then you're going to want to have contact information right below that. It's because this is generally where people expect to see it. So, we don't want to make them work hard or get too fancy by having this placed somewhere else. We don't want to sacrifice effectiveness for artistry in that case.
Yeah.
And then right below that, I like to incorporate two pieces of information that can really help to deepen that story and connect you immediately with the people who you want to read your resume. I always say a good rule of thumb in sales and marketing. If you're in sales and marketing and watching this, you will know this too. A good rule of thumb is great marketing will be exciting to the right prospect and a turnoff to the wrong ones. So we want to make sure that right up at the top, you are hooking the person that you want to hire you right out of the gate. So the first thing I have people do is actually put a short statement. It's just one line and it talks about the overall impact or the overall mission that you have for being in this business. And kind of like you and I were talking about earlier on this Zoom, is generally this industry is full of power players that have a real heart for what they're doing. If you stay in medical sales long enough, it is typically, in my experience, because you do find that greater fulfillment of the impact that you have on people, patients, and providers. So don't be afraid to put your swan song at the top of the resume because people want to know that you're passionate about this company and that you're applying to and what you do. And so sometimes you don't just want to tell them, you want to show them. So right up at the top, put a quick byline of what you're all about in this industry and where business and impacting others is concerned. The second thing I would recommend right at the top is you do not need an objective statement anymore. And this is especially effective for those of you who are coming right out of school, or if you're positioning yourself to pivot into medical sales from maybe another industry, be it finance, be it chiropractics, be it, marketing, wherever you're wanting to come in from. You don't need to unleash an objective. We know what you're here for. We know why you created this resume if in the opening paragraph, we call it our opening summary. In the opening paragraph, you lead with who you are as a professional, what you do so well, and for whom. That will immediately share what the value is that you're ready to dispel on this industry and what companies would be wise to align with you should they bring you through that interview process. So that's the structure in terms of hierarchy of information because you really do want to get to that. I've been looking at resumes since I was 13. So the truth is that I clocked myself a few times and I really can dress down a resume in about 6 to 7 seconds. It's fast. And you, Kendi, as a recruiter, you know that when you get that few seconds of information or of time to go through someone's resume, you're going right to the information that matters the most for you. So in terms of hierarchy, lead people where you want them to look first. If you've got really big headlines that say, skills or professional experience or education, maybe those are centered on your document, but they don't need to be the biggest, boldest thing there. Instead, I would like to see information that's big and bold where the results are concerned or where the mission and vision is concerned and as it's relevant to this company.
Yeah. And I think I can only imagine the hundreds of thousands of resumes you've seen at this point in your career. And I'm sure within that first second, you can tell how much time and energy somebody's put into that resume. You can quickly, tell if it's something that they're just kind of throwing, and as you mentioned earlier, just spraying it all over, or something that they really took their time and put together, and it's specific for that company. Do you recommend creating one generic resume that you're sending out to everyone, or do you coach your clients to really create a specific resume and tailor it to that specific opening in that company?
Kenny, you know me. It's all about specifics.
I
So
think I know
yeah,
the answer, but I would encourage others
yeah,
to do this. Like
yeah.
it's so important.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I
Yeah,
think that spray and pray approach, unfortunately, is as bad as it sounds.
yeah,
It's not going to give you the momentum that is required to play in this competitive job market. And here's
yeah,
the other kind of side benefit that a lot of our clients experience when you do take the time to figure out who you are as a professional, dig through that value, that relevance, and those wins that they want to see, and do the research on your target. So, you guys, I mean, you can hire this out, or you can really take it upon yourself to do these steps. And the side benefit that you'll find is you're a lot clearer about the impact that you would have on that kind of an organization just by going through those steps. And this is where, unfortunately, I see a lot of people missing the boat when they use AI because they put the heavy lifting and the mental thinking power in the hands of the algorithm that's putting out the information and cross-referencing information and all those things, which functionally is faster. But in terms of you being able to creatively and flexibly understand where you, maybe as a someone who's been entrenched in the spine market forever, but you want to pivot into interventional radiology or cardiology, where you really would have that dynamic impact. And so I would encourage you guys, if anybody is really just resorting to ChatGPT, and I know there are so many prompts out there, you can prompt it to create you a prompt, and you can prompt it to create the prompt to create the prompt. Like, I get it. However, um, when it comes to your story, don't sell yourself short,
yeah,
because the action of you doing the deep work and you doing the introspection that it really would take for this job anyway, to know how you would be impactful here, that will almost inform the entire rest of the interaction with that hiring process. So, for example, you say, okay, I want to pivot from marketing into women's health and diagnostics. So, by all means, do the research how you want to, but then write your story yourself and write why you really would be passionate in this industry. What does it mean to you? Oftentimes, when I have a client who will pivot into oncology or the neurospace or women's health, is because they've had a wonderful career, but then they've been personally impacted by some segment of healthcare. And so that is tangible and meaningful. And so by going through the steps yourself, you're really challenging your brain to conceptualize how you would be impactful here. And you're going to get more information and you're going to have more depth of understanding if you take the time to really curate that message. So, when it comes to your resume, are we doing this on every single resume which we use to apply? Well, I would say to a degree. It's all about what kind of ROI you have on your time. So for me, I always recommend a specific resume for the job you're applying. But consider this. Maybe you do want to apply to a couple of genomic health companies. And so you're going to look at those genomic health companies as a group. And you're going to ask yourself, okay, as a group, I would probably say that this is the kind of impact I would intend to have in the genomics space. This is the value I would bring to that specific market. And so for those specific applications, I would use your genomic resume. And you can tweak it for each company. You can even mention the company within that
yeah,
opener. But at
yeah.
least if you're niching down to that one general target, you'll find a lot faster results than using one resume for every specialty that you go after.
Yeah. I think it's so important, and someone who's also sees a lot of resumes, I can tell very quickly if someone's put any time or effort into really tailoring that resume for that position. Or sometimes the headline even says looking for pharmaceutical sales job and this is a medical sales job, right? Or this is a sort of like it's the completely wrong thing. And so I think just taking a few extra minutes, seconds to kind of make sure you're sending the right resume that's tailored for that, position or that company, it just means so much, right? And as a recruiter or a manager, they can tell that right away. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with managers and they've passed on candidates with great experience, but their resume was so bad that they were like, I can't even meet with this person. This resume is so bad. Like they have put no time, no energy, no preparation into this. And for that reason, even though I like their experience, I don't think there's someone I want to meet with. And so it
Mhm.
can be a deal breaker. I've seen it happen. So I think, there's the other side of the coin, right? The sales rep's like, well, I sell. Doing resumes is not my thing, right? It's not what I'm good at. So I think that's why working with someone like you is so important. It's like go out and invest in someone who does this, is really good at it, knows what to put on it, and can help you really stand out, when you do submit that resume. Um,
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask one more question, guys. Again, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. We'll do some Q&A at the end as well. But if there's something specific to your resume or situation you're in, please, I mean, now is an incredible chance to ask Claire and get some great advice. But Claire, when I think about and you can talk about your triple S system that
Mhm.
you really defined and built out and used to work with your clients. Statistics, I believe, is one of them. Is statistics one of the S's? Okay.
Yes, it is. Very
Okay.
good.
For me, I can't tell you how many times a manager, we're on a call about a sales opening, and they're like, I need someone who's got a proven history of success, right? They've got to have sales numbers, make sure it's on the resume. Don't send me a resume without some numbers on it. Talk to me about, statistics, what that means, how a rep really needs to leverage those numbers. And also, what if you're not in a sales role and maybe don't have those numbers to highlight? How do you build statistics or build kind of a sales resume if you don't have that yet?
Such a great question. And you know what, especially for those who are pivoting in or are in a role where you're not privy to the numbers. You don't get quarterly quota data, or perhaps you do, but you are in a company that the data lags. Right. So,
Yeah.
for all of those reasons, you might be a little nervous or maybe feel like, oh gosh, I don't really have the numbers that I need. But the truth is that you really do. So first, Kendi, you're absolutely right. The Triple S system, and we can actually even link if you'd like to it. I did a free training that everyone can have access to sort of supplement or to follow along after this as well. But the Triple S system is your story, style, and statistics. And the reason that those three things became my system was really not because I had like an epiphany of resumes. Like, believe me, I've quite literally seen it all when it comes to resumes. But the truth is, it was because, like anything, when you do something so many times, the patterns start to emerge. And you're like, oh, yeah, well, these are the three things. And so, after being a recruiter and then helping everyone I knew with their resume and interview and cover letter since until we started the business, I'd seen more than 16,000 medical sales resumes. So this is like a
Wow.
study like no other in itself. And that's where I recognized that the people who were getting picked up the fastest had these three boxes checked. So that's what we'll talk about a little bit today. But you're right. The third one is statistics. And just like you said, we're in sales. And so it stands to reason that statistics and numbers and data is going to be really, really important because you really can't claim progress if you can't measure it. And so, how do we do that? So, first of all, I would recommend as many of your bullets as possible to be tied to a number in some way. You're going to be wanting to talk about ways that you've grown, ways that you've improved, ways that you've saved, or ways that you have um, fixed something, like rescued something. And then think about it in terms of what we can measure. And so, again, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, well, that's great, but I didn't get a quota, or I didn't have access to those numbers, or maybe my numbers really weren't that good last quarter. Don't worry, because those are not the only numbers that you could talk about. So, in these cases, I would encourage you to get a little bit more creative with the data that we really do have around our career. So, for example, right now you have just sat through almost one entire resume session with the Lobby Network. There's some data. Like, it doesn't have to be anything you make up. Please, please, please always be honest on your resume. Do not inflate your numbers. If you inflate your numbers, and somebody may, but probably will, discover that you did, it will crush your credibility, sometimes career long. So please keep it factual. But remember, just like the silly metric I threw out about us sitting here for our very first, 45-minute webinar, you have a lot that you can measure. So think about improvements, time savings, things that you've done in terms of number of people, the number of physicians that you were calling on, comparisons. So what were you doing within the first month of your job, and what were you doing at the ninth month of your job? And how has that changed, improved, streamlined, been fixed, grown? Um, you can talk about your impact in terms of a team. This is kind of a tough one because a lot of times we feel like, well, if we're on a team, do we really get to own that accomplishment? Of course you do. Because if
Yeah.
you were not on that team, it was not going to go down that way. So do own your team accomplishments. And you can mention the team, of course, but remember that you were a key contributor. So the team's success is also your success. Okay. And then let's see, in terms of numbers, I have a whole worksheet, Kendi. I've got like 50 things that you can measure that's not quota. So we can
Yeah.
share that as well. We'll
Awesome.
have that available through the lobby. But there are a lot of things that are so close, but we just generally don't think about encapsulating our impact in our day-to-day with numbers if they're not specifically quota. But anything you
Yeah.
can measure, think in terms of, financial value, timelines, time saved, budgets, and generally how you made your manager's life a little bit easier by the actions that you are taking.
Yeah, love that. Going back to the baseball analogy, I guess we'll stick with that. But I used to collect baseball cards as a kid, and look at the back of the baseball card, and there was all these numbers, right? It was on base percentage, home runs, batting averages, right? Same thing in your sales resume. It should look and feel like a baseball card, right? There should be results on there. And what I love is you come up with so many strategic ways to create results, right? Not fabricated, but pulling what you've been doing, whether it's growing a territory from month 1 to month 9, even though you maybe missed quota, you still grew the territory by $1 million, right? You still have results to brag about. Where I see this a lot too is like the clinical specialist or an ASR that's trying to get that first sales rep job and make that jump, right? Maybe they feel like, well, these aren't my sales numbers, these are my TM sales numbers, or this was the team sales numbers. But to your point, you're still part of that, right? You're still contributed to that team success. And so certainly pulling in those numbers, you have every right to kind of be a part of that.
Hmm.
So
You
we've
know,
talked about, go ahead.
oh, so one quick one I wanted to share
Yeah.
because I think this one goes unsung a lot is this industry is all about relationships. And remember that maintaining those relationships is a big deal, especially when you're looking to leverage the fact that you have relationships in a certain industry to go to the next one. So you can also talk about how many physicians remained, your customers for the 9 months that you were at that company.
Yeah.
If you as a clinical specialist or an associate were able to help your sales rep maintain 98% of their customer base for over a year, that's massive, you guys. So
Yeah.
don't sleep on these numbers. And we can figure out a way to get that worksheet out to the lobby too, because there's a lot about you that you can speak to in terms of numbers, and you should. And the bonus is that most people don't. So most people stop at quota, and they're not providing additional majorly impactful statistics. So when you do, you're already thinking outside the box.
I love it. I love it. And thank you so much for sharing that. We will record this. We'll put it on the lobby so that you can go into the lobby platform, access this. We'll attach some resources. I'm going to go ahead and attach also the link to your resume kind of workshop or rewrite. So if anybody wants to click on that, work with you, on your resume, I highly recommend Claire. Again, I've just seen the impact that she's made. I know her experience, the number of resumes she's seen, and can really tailor that resume to kind of where you're looking to go. And that's what I love about Claire is that she really asks a lot of questions in the beginning to get to know you, your goals, and then helps navigate and kind of guide you to those goals. Claire, before we open up the other, questions that the individuals may have about their specific resumes or their certain situations, is there anything else that you wanted to share that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I think just to round out that triple S system, we better not skip over style. So,
Yeah.
really quick, let's talk style because it is not about being flashy. If you've been in medical sales or want to be in medical sales and have studied this industry, we are not about flash and bang. We are about targeted approaches. So, use the same kind of messaging, use the same kind of theory and methodology when you are styling your document. And I would encourage you to actually take a good look at what the companies you're targeting look like, feel like, sound like. And you'll find that a Novartis is very different than a Medtronic, is very different than a Hellomix. They look differently. They have different focus points you can find on their website and everything in between. So just like Kendi's baseball coaching advice, and how we kind of started this conversation. Let your target be your guide and do a little
Yeah.
bit of legwork so that when you are trying to target a group of companies in a certain sector, do your homework and how the look, feel, and language comes across from them. And if you really want to hit the gas, make sure you connect with people within those companies or who used to work at those companies so you can get an even deeper understanding of what those companies really care about. So you can fashion your document in the very same way. You can even use some of the same looks, feels, color theory in your document. And I would just recommend as baseline advice, keep it simple and easy to read. Have a traditional left to right document, which lets the brain really digest that information the fastest. So, columns, if you don't have to, don't use them. Just think simple, clean, what can be read quickly and efficiently, and try and emulate your customer in those different aspects that we talked about. And you'll find that your resume will instantly be targeted to where you want to go next. So that's style. And I would love to answer any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, I love that you touched on that because I think so many people, you can get on resume writers or builders, and there's all these different formats, and they get creative with it. I can tell you, as a recruiter or manager that's seeing these things, they look at that, and then the first step is just kind of to look back, right? What is this? Where are these pieces? Why is this over here? So to your point, it's like keep it simple. The resume template is tried and true. It's the information, right? It's the statistics and story that really make it stand out. It's not going to be the style that gets you your job. So many reps will reach out or I'll talk to them at one of our networking events and they'll say, I've applied to 200 jobs and I haven't heard anything back. I'm like, well, hey, why are you applying to 200 jobs, right? Be a little bit more targeted, more specific, but also take a look in the mirror, right? If you're not getting any response from your resume, maybe it's time to look at this resume and say, why is no one getting back to me about this? How can I improve it? So again, it's your first impression. It's your first chance with the recruiter or with the manager to take a look at you and digest your skill set and what you bring to the table. I think it's so important to include these things that Claire mentioned. Two questions I'll read to you, Claire, that are in the chat here. But again, anybody that wants to kind of pop on, feel free to jump off mute, maybe turn your camera on or leave it off and ask a question if you want to. But Joel asked, I'm currently a master's student studying biomedical engineering with a focus in medical device design. I'm graduating this upcoming May and striving to get my foot in the door as a medical device associate or associate clinical specialist. I believe I have the technical and clinical OR experience to succeed in a role. However, I don't have the 1 year of B2B sales experience I find most entry level jobs require. What advice do you have for someone in their situation?
That's a really great
So
question.
coming out of school, looking for that associate level job, but doesn't have that B2B sales experience that a lot of job requirements have.
hmm Well, one great thing about colleges and master's programs is often you have a robust alumni network. And I highly recommend that you tap right in there because um, often you will be able to connect a little bit deeper with those who were connected to that particular program, even perhaps companies that were involved or interested in some of the medical device design that comes out of your university or your master's program. So, first, I would start there and I would start with networking as a robust way of life. We can do a networking masterclass, Kendi, maybe
A
another
whole nother
time.
topic. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's the
but
next one.
there's lots and lots. So follow me on the lobby so that you can learn more about how we teach networking as well. The other piece is there are a lot of ways that you can get that B2B experience, certainly by some of those entry level roles with companies like an enterprise, like a Xerox, like companies that are, well, Xerox, gosh, that's an oldie. But you can get the traditional B2B experience if you like. And in some ways, there really isn't always a fast track to getting right into the industry without it. However, since you're already focusing on this particular segment of medical device design, I would wager that you would probably have a pretty good shot at networking your way in to at least a couple ride alongs and at least a couple of interviews or informational interviews with people who work for companies where you're interested. This would take some outbound messaging on your part because you would want to make sure that you are showing your interest, but also being upfront that you don't necessarily have that B2B sales experience yet, but you're looking to get your foundation and you're looking to learn and get a little bit of a leg up here if they're willing to even just share with you kind of what it's like to be in that industry. The final door I would say is that you can pivot or you can position your experience that you've had in the past in terms of why it would be relevant to sales. And I would encourage you to do that. Especially a lot of students that I work with, we tend to find that they have some experience that is sales like in their background. And so what I would do is I would have you reach out to people in those networking and those informational interview sessions, and I would ask them a little bit about what it takes to be a B2B salesperson here. What's beautiful about starting with that approach is that when they start to sort of unlock the things that are really required, the advice that they would give to enter into the industry in this way, it's going to jog your memory for what you have that's resonating with that. So you may be overlooking a little bit of experience that you have that should you share it in this light with them, they would say, "Oh yeah, you would definitely be a shoe-in." And they may even just take a chance on you right in the associate role. So it's never a guarantee, but I would say that networking would be your best bet, and I would loop in your master's program to help you with that as well.
Yeah, love it. Such great advice. Just to add to that, I would say, a lot of the associate rep jobs do want to have some sort of sales experience, right? They want to know that you at least, cut your teeth somewhere, whether it's ADP, Paychex, Xerox, whoever it was. Also, there's some ASR roles out there that don't require that. I think if you look at like the orthopedic distributor market, they're a lot more willing to kind of overlook that sales experience. So the ortho ASR, there's also a role called the on-site specialist. Stryker has it, Carl Stores has it. You're working in the OR, kind of covering cases. It's a stepping stone to that ASR role, but it certainly gets you in the door with a med device company and kind of a sales role. Or you go get that sales experience, as Claire mentioned, with one of these companies and then step into that ASR role. So just kind of choosing your path. I also think, as you identify companies that you're interested in, do a LinkedIn search and you can search the people that work there and type in engineering. See if anybody comes up with an engineering background that you connect with and see if they made the jump from engineering into like an ASR role, and reach out to them and say, "Hey, I see that you did it. I'm looking to do the same thing," right? And kind of make that connection with them, and they may be likely to kind of engage with you and consult you or mentor you in making that transition as well.
Yeah, If I can add just one tiny piece after that, that's brilliant advice, Kendi, and I love your incorporation of using that search. Um, Companies also are more impressed than ever by those who invest in their own upskilling before approaching the role. So don't discount some of the sales and foundational and fundamental sales coaching programs or sales education programs or even books that you
Yeah.
can absorb and bring to the organization, because nothing says I'm really ready to get this sales thing whipped like going out and doing your own upskilling in sales to bring that into the company from the get-go. So that's another thing you could add, and it would be great to see that on your resume near the education section as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Such good advice. I'm going to pause for a second to see if anybody wants to raise their hand or to come off mute and ask a specific question around their resume or around their situation.
I see there's one from Roylan. Did we answer this one yet? Maybe in part.
Hi, Claire and Kenny. This is Roylan speaking.
Hi, Roylan.
So thank you for sharing. You answered part of my question earlier, but essentially, just to summarize what I was asking is I'm making a career transition from medical device manufacturing to sales, and I feel like I have a lot of good information and skills and statistics on the resume now, but they're all tailored to my specific industry. And I want to be able to exploit that and have that be useful in a sales environment or to a sales recruiter. So again, you answered some of that, but wanting to hear your thoughts on how I can tailor that to a sales role.
Yeah. So when we are positioning somebody like you, and I would say, or someone with your experience rather, and you are making kind of this micro pivot, so same industry but different role, the very best intel you can get are from people who have worked in that role or have worked in that role previously. And so much like Kendi shared, where you can also search and you can layer your search with someone who did have engineering first and made it into sales, you can go that route. That's a great way that he shared. Otherwise, you can also talk with people at the company and see what their objectives are. We tend to think that sales tends to be this like, you know, catch all for we're all experiencing the same challenge and we're all just trying to close more customers. But the truth is that every single company and scenario and team is so incredibly nuanced, not to mention the personalities and the specialties. So you might find that as you do more informational interviews, more things will be jogged in your memory as you ask people what the real rigors are of the job and what are the challenges they seem like, they tend to be facing over and over again. It'll help you to know what to talk about and also how to kind of parlay your experience in terms of relevance to their sale and their challenges. So if it were me, I would probably put together a list of maybe 10 to 15 target companies, and then I would start to look for people who work there. And you can always add Kendi's advice of adding that engineering component to your search to see if anyone has made that jump there. And then I would start your, outbound outreach. What's fun too is that when you're in the interview and they're saying, "Well, Roylan, you haven't necessarily been in sales yet. How do you feel that you'll be successful in sales here?" You can even talk about how you led your job search in terms of a sales funnel, which is exactly what this is. So, I would lead with informational interviews and learning more about your customer. And then if you want, you can upskill, you can invest in some sales trainings for yourself or read some great sales books. And when you're interviewing, you can talk in terms of how you would set up your business and how your medical device engineering aptitude has actually given you an edge on sales. And for these reasons, because you look at sales with this added edge. And that's where I would recommend that you start. Is that helpful?
Such great advice.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I think also like, when I think about your experience, I mean, you're already on the engineering side, when I understand it, with a med device company currently. So leveraging that, going and talking to someone in sales, right? Talking to some of your sales reps, sales managers, kind of raising your hand and starting to have those conversations and showing interest and making sure they know that. And also your competitors would be great, great clients to go after, right? That's a great company that would love to have your knowledge on their side of the fence, right? So if you're manufacturing knees, right, for total knee replacements, and you're working at company A, company B is going to love to have someone like you on your team, because you know the engineering, the science, the manufacturing behind the competitive product. So I think kind of staying in your wheelhouse there, as far as products go, and then focusing on kind of finding someone at engineering background, like Claire said. So good luck to you. Such great
Yeah,
advice
keep
from
us in the
Claire.
loop.
I
Thank
do want to be
you.
mindful of your time, Claire. I know we're kind of coming up on the time here. Thank you so much for everything you do, all your willingness to carve out time to share your knowledge with our community at the lobby. You know, two things, guys, for next steps. I did put Claire's link in the chat. So if you're interested in scheduling some time to talk to Claire, you're looking for, her to kind of guide, mentor you through some of those things we talked about with the story, the style, statistics, and really kind of take your resume to the next level. I can't recommend her enough. If you're looking for roles, if you're looking for openings, go on the lobby. We do have, the largest medical sales job board in the industry now. We average about 5,000 openings a day on there. So it's a great resource for you to find openings on the lobby. Also find additional webinars, networking events, and tons of resources. So we'll be sure to record this. And also Claire's got another one recorded on the platform as well. So if you found this helpful, go find her other one and watch that one as well. So Claire, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. And let's do it again soon.
Oh, absolutely, Kendi. I love the lobby. I love what you've built, and I love talking to you. So let's make it a regular thing.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you, everybody, for attending, making the time, and being here. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.